Hello, my name is Maggie Kuusinen. I am a knitter and sewist living in Denver, Colorado. And I am just here today to chat about the knitting and sewing that I have been working on over the last couple of weeks. So you can find me on Ravelry at KuusiKnits and Instagram at maggie.coos. I'm not very I don't spend a lot of time on any sort of social media platform, so I don't really upload very often on either one of those things, but if you want to follow me, that is where you'll find me. But again, this is hilarious. I'm only saying this because like 20 people watched my last, which I know is like nothing when you think about like how many people watch other things on Instagram, but for me, I was like, that's more than my mom, so I don't know, unless my mom watched it like 25 times, who knows. Um, but I will begin. I'm going to be drinking some coffee out of this amazing mug made by an artist up near Steamboat Springs, Colorado. I think he lives in Oak Creek, Colorado, which is right outside of where I grew up. So it's delicious. I'm going to start with what I'm wearing. So this is really like the first big knitting project that I ever made. It is the Kodikas by Caitlin Hunter. It is a shawl that is these colorwork bands that between them are just plain stockinette. I named this one Buckbeak because it just reminded me of that animal, and you know, he's such an important character that I think isn't played up very much just because he allows them to save Sirius Black and obviously has a really big part in the third book. But he's honestly continues to be important through the whole series. You know, there are times when they're at Grimmauld Place and Sirius like isn't able to come talk to Harry because he's upstairs taking care of Buckbeak and things like that. This yarn is all undyed yarn, which is part of the reason why I wanted to name it after an animal like Buckbeak, because I think that it's just a celebration of the sheep and a celebration of the animals. And it's funny because this being my first colorwork project and my first like real big knitting project, I think it's one of those things where you do something that you think is going to be really hard and then, or sorry, you do something and you don't realize how hard it's going to be. And choosing to do for my first colorwork knit flat is kind of crazy because I'm like learning how to do color work and also like purling and stuff. I don't know that I would, I mean, it was great and I really, really love this, but it would be an intense thing to do it again. I don't know if I'd want to do color work in the color work knitted flat again, but and you know, I was definitely learning, so you can see that the tension of this first one is really tight and it makes this kind of ripple, sort of ripple as you're holding it. But I mean, it doesn't, I'm like so proud of it. I'll show you my floats because everyone seems to do that. I don't really know why, but this is the back. I think, you know, for my first color work, it's like not too bad. I'm pretty impressed, but anyway, so yes, this is my Buckbeak, Kodikas by Caitlin Hunter. My next thing I want to talk about is some finished objects, and you guys, I have like more than I would expect to have in 2 weeks. Partially it's because they're socks, and those socks like have been on the needles for a long time, so it was just like finally doing toes and things like that. But let's start with this one. So I showed this in the last episode. This is my Hagrid and Madame Maxime Try to Enlist the Giants. And this is the Kobuk hat by Caitlin Hunter. As you can tell, Caitlin Hunter is probably my favorite knitwear designer. I really love her sort of rustic aesthetic, and it really matches with my own aesthetic, and I think also just with the fashion of the West, in particular the American West. So this is my Hagrid and Madame Maxime Try to Enlist the Giants Kobuk hat. It is knit with some Mad Tosh DK twist in the Venti Dragon Mocha colorway, and then also just a mohair that adds this just like really beautiful halo to the hat. And I am just showing this as a finished object because I actually did weave in the ends, which is a miracle. And then I also attached this amazing pom-pom. I don't know, I think that I'm like getting really excited about just like the giant pom-pom, and I think it looks really good with the slouchiness of this hat, so I'm pretty excited about it. It is like way too hot for me to wear right now, but I think it's something that I'm gonna really enjoy wearing this winter. And I also really like that this is a detachable pom-pom, so I'm thinking about getting more of these and just sort of moving this pom-pom around from hat to hat, because I just think it adds like a little rustic touch, and it's also just like really fun. So that is my first like actually is completely done finished object. And the next thing is I have a couple of pairs of socks that I finished. Both of these we've seen in previous episodes. So these are my Mischief Managed socks. I'll put them on. I mean, this is crazy but maybe I'll want to see them on my feet later. So this is my first sock. This is my Mischief Managed sock. It is inspired by the Marauders map. I knit these out of Nomadic Yarn's Mischief Managed colorway. I started with 64 stitches. I did a 1x1 twisted rib and then a fish lips kiss heel just in a red mini that I had lying around. I really like the contrast, and I've also started doing this thing to reduce the amount of ends I have to weave in when I'm doing the fish lips kiss heel with a alternating color. I just started adding, and I just think it looks cool to have well, it's actually 2 knit stitches, but to have a stripe of the heel color that's actually on the front of the sock. So I started doing that, and I actually really like it. It's in both of the socks that I have done, that I finished for this week, or the last couple of weeks. The next one was a half-finished object on the last podcast, and that is my Diagon Alley socks. So again, this is yarn made by Nomadic Yarns in their Diagon Alley colorway. This one is on the yak base, and because it has that yak, it's a little bit darker and sort of causes the colors to be a little bit more dark and muted, and I really like that. I think the one thing is that it makes it so that the contrast between this color and this color is not as much, because those are actually 2 different colors. But the yak sort of makes them look pretty similar. I love it. So with this is the Soda Water hat by Yucca Knit. And then I also have some Knerd String contrast to do this amazing picot cuff, which I just think is so cute. And then also to a Mad Tosh to do a fish lips kiss heel. You know, I've noticed that the fish lips kiss heel fits me really well when I have a textured sock like this that makes it give a little bit, but I actually don't like as much how it fits on me with a plain vanilla sock, which is kind of a bummer, because plain vanilla sock, like the fish lips kiss heel, is so great for self-striping socks because it allows you to make the heel without splitting up the stripes. But I just don't like how it fits me as much. Like, I think my instep is too high and it causes it to be a little bit tight. But I don't know. I'm toying around with like doing a couple different things. I think the knitting expat Mina Phillip has sort of an alternative, so I might buy one of her sock patterns and see how she does it. But again, you can see that I added the stripe from this going through to the front of the sock. I just think that adds like a little pop, like, hey, there's a secret hiding on the bottom of your foot. Like, don't you want to see what it is? I don't know. Literally no one is looking at my feet but me, but these are made for me. Like, it's a box of socks, of Harry Potter socks, so they can have Harry Potter with me every day, everywhere I go. And nobody will know but me, except for that I will tell everyone, because it's practically all that I talk about. But Anyhow, I really love these socks. I think the pattern is so simple that it makes it really easy to just do it. You know, you have to look at the pattern for like your first round, and then after that it becomes really easy to take it anywhere you want to go. So I'm just going to put them on so that you can see what they look like. I have to adjust the picot edge because I haven't actually sewed it down yet, because I have a very loose, like, finished objects are very loose in my terms. But anyway, this is the sock, having to get really, and you can kind of see it coming through, but I really like this picot edge. I think it just adds like a really nice finishing touch to the sock. But anyway, now that you've just seen my legs and my feet and my lack of flexibility, I will move on to my last finished object, which is actually something that I stayed up until 2 a.m. yesterday working on, and then I woke up at 7 this morning and I finished, and I'm really excited about it. And that is my snake nailed to the Gaunt shack. Excuse me, shawl. I'm so excited. So this is the Askews Me shawl by Stephen West. It is my first brioche project ever. And I think brioche was really intimidating to learn. So Stephen West, in his pattern, he puts up a good resource for you to learn brioche, which I found to be like incredibly useful. I think I've probably talked about it before, but it is a blueprint course that is taught by Nancy Marchant, and it's called Explorations in Brioche Knitting. It's an amazing course in which she starts off just sort of showing you the potential of brioche and what it is, and then it goes into casting on, 1-color brioche, 2-color brioche, increases, decreases, and really gets you comfortable with the fundamentals of brioche. And I love that I have that class, because I actually would set this down briefly and then go back, and be like, oh, I don't really remember how to do this increase. And so I could just turn on the class again and rewatch that little section of the class. And I found that to be very useful. I definitely still made some mistakes in this shawl, but as my first brioche project, I actually am so proud of it. So one last time, this is 2 different colorways. They're both singles that I held together. One is, and I just have these 2 little balls left, which will be added to one of my works in progress that I'll talk about in just a second. But so the front of it is La Bien-Aimée in the emeline colorway. It's like quite big. Like, I haven't blocked it yet, so it's not totally finished, but it is huge, and I'm really excited to see what happens to this fabric when it's blocked. But this is the emeline colorway. It is a La Bien-Aimée yarn that my mom got for me when her and my wonderful, beautiful Auntie Susie went on a trip to Paris and a couple other places in Europe. And then the back side of it is Voolenvine yarns in the Deadly Nightshades colorway. I just love it. I'll take this off, partially because I'm getting really hot and partially because I want to show you. Just fold it here for a second. So like I said, I haven't blocked this. I haven't weaved in any ends. But oh my gosh, I love it. I mean, just look at this. I love that it's asymmetric. I think that adds something so interesting. And then, because I was running low on my yarn, and also truthfully because I haven't really done an I-cord bind off that is as long as this one, and also because I just wanted something a little bit fun. I mean, after all, even though I did choose very muted colors, it is still a Stephen West pattern, and I think he he encourages knitters to sort of get out of their comfort zone a little bit. So I went to Fancy Tiger Crafts to pick up a yarn for the I-cord, and I ended up getting this yarn, which I still have a lot of it left, but I think I'll use it to make some mitts or something like this. So this is Portuguese yarn. It's the Retrosaria brand, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce that because I do not speak Portuguese in any way. But it's just a DK weight single ply yarn in this yellow color, and I think against these colors, I think it's really beautiful, and it kind of pulls out the colors within the shawl and goes really well with the colors in the shawl, but also has like a really fun pop of color and a little bit of contrast. I have to give a shout out to the people at Fancy Tiger Crafts because I went in there and I was like, I need an I-cord edge and I'm having a little bit of difficulty finding which color I want. And I was looking at totally different yarn, totally different colors, and they walked me over to this and they were like, this is going to look really cool. And I mean, I know this shouldn't matter, but I think a lot of times people think that people are trying to sell you things, but this was only $7.25 for 50 grams. And the other thing I was looking at was like 3 times that expensive. More than that, like 4 times that expensive. So that was really, I don't know, I just felt like it was like a really, really great experience. I always have a good experience going in there. But yes, my snake nailed to the Gaunt shack. Finished object. And I will be blocking this and maybe I'll wear it next time if it's not too hot here in Denver. It's still, fall is finally in the air. I think for a long time I was just complaining endlessly about the fact that I really, really, really want fall to come because I think very similar to most knitters, I just like really, really don't like the summer. It's just too hot and I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And so, well, to be clear, I don't like it in the Front Range, which is sort of what we call this part of Colorado. So sort of like the Denver metro area, Boulder, Fort Collins, like this whole front part of, or I guess plainy part of the state. And for me, I came from the mountains where it's like 85 degrees is like hot in Steamboat. You're like, whoa, like what is going on? But down here in Denver, that's like a cool summer day, which is just a nightmare. So anyway, that's enough of me complaining endlessly about how much I don't like the summer, but fall is in the air. Like mornings are crisp, and I had a pumpkin beer, and it was delicious. And I'm really, really excited for the winter and the fall. So I'm gonna move on to some works in progress. The first that I want to talk about, just because I know that I do both sewing and knitting, but I am much better at knitting than I am at sewing. This is something that I just sort of do for fun and I'm still very much learning about. I have to point this out. My great-grandma, Grandma Ritchie, who lived in Leeds, South Dakota, made these ages ago, like literally probably 50 years ago. And they are my favorite hangers. They are just crocheted around like probably a metal hanger, but honestly I don't know what's under there. She added these little tufts to them. They're fantastic. They make it so that your clothes don't slip off. It's incredible. We have like hundreds of them at our house. And I stole a lot of them when I moved out to college, and I still bring them everywhere because they're the best. But this is my Hues dress by Friday Pattern Co. It is, last time I showed it on the podcast, it was just the bodice, and now I have added the entire skirt to it. So really all I need to do with this is sew the button band, so sew all the buttons on and make all the buttonholes, and then add the sleeves and sort of do some last minute finishing. But I'm really excited about it. I am going into internal medicine and pediatrics, hopefully, like I said, I recorded a little thing before this, but I was like, nobody cares about that. But now I'm saying it again anyway. So I am applying to internal medicine and pediatrics. It's a dual residency where I'll be board certified in both of those specialties. And I just submitted my applications on Friday, the 13th. Hopefully that is not a testament to like anything going wrong, but you know what? 13 has always been my lucky number, so. But anyway, this is, I'm just gonna try, I mean, you're not gonna be able to see this, but So essentially, this will be a bodice that kind of comes over like this. There will be buttons down it, and then it has a little part in the back where you put through a tie, and then you can cinch it down in the back. It'll be T-length, and it is this amazing fabric that I got at Joann's Fabric that is all, it's sort of like stained glass of all the houses, and I just think it's so awesome. And the reason why I started talking about my residency is that when I'm working on peds, on the peds wards and things like that, I will definitely be able to wear this because pediatricians get to wear fun clothes, which I really appreciate. So yeah, this is my Hogwarts House dress, my Hues dress by Friday Pattern Co., and it'll be finished when it gets finished. I think knitting is really fun because you get to make like an entire outfit in a very short amount of time, but I also find it to be boring. So we'll see how long it takes me to actually finish that. Okay. I feel like I've just been talking so much, but I got a lot done in the last couple weeks, which is crazy. So the next work in progress that I'm going to talk about is my Acromantula Venom sock. So this is the Acromantula Venom colorway by Teeny Button Studio. This is reference to the 6th book of the Harry Potter series, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, when Harry gets a memory of what the Horcruxes are from Professor Slughorn. I've already shown this. I just have to knit a little bit more, like maybe another 4 rows and then put in a toe and this will be done. But this is sort of my own pattern. It's 64 stitches, and then I used the Japanese knitting sort of textbook to come up with this lace pattern at the top that does this sort of eyelet, and then I continued these twisted stitches down the rest of the foot. I like it. It looks really small when you see it here, but I like that there are those ridges throughout the whole thing because it fits really, really well. Truthfully, it's that I think I switched it to knitting in Magic Loop too early, and I really, really hate Magic Loop. I think it just takes forever, and so I sort of, once I did that, I stopped working on it because once I put it on here, I realized that I needed a few more rows, and I was like, I hate this. So anyway. The next work in project that I have is my Into the Pensive, and this is a pattern called Hunter by Jared Flood. It is actually made from yarn from my hometown, just outside of Steamboat Springs. Well, I grew up in Steamboat Springs, but the yarn itself is from just outside of Steamboat Springs, a small town called Oak Creek, which is the second time I've mentioned that today, which is strange because I don't spend a ton of time there. But this is High Mountain Wool of Routt County, which is the county that I'm from, and it is worsted Rambouillet wool. And it's so lovely. It's worsted spun. It feels beautiful. And I also have a couple progress keepers on here, which you've probably, I mean, I know that you've already seen them, but so this one is a set that I got that has, I think it's from New Leaf, but it has all of the Harry Potter books. And then the second one was a Simply Serving mystery yarn club that I did. That was awesome. And so this second one is the one that I put on, I think, last week. So last week I had this on, and then I finished all the way up to where you switch to this textured pattern, and then also where you stop for the armhole. And so I'm just sort of knitting up the back and the armhole. So when I went to my yarn store, there was not enough of the darker color, and so I ended up having to alternate during this middle section with a lighter color. And then I didn't want the line, which you can see here is a very, very obvious line right here. I didn't want that to, I wanted it to look intentional. So what I did is I actually changed to start doing this sort of cable pattern motif a little bit early, so that right when I ran out of this light colored yarn, I just switched to this part of the pattern instead of continuing this for another like inch or so that it would look very obvious. Obvious in a way that it made it look like I meant to do it. So you can also see a very similar line right there with the ribbing in this original texture pattern. And I think that it looks like I did it on purpose. I think it'll add like a really subtle little block color to it. And it was what I had to do to have enough yarn. So knitting away at this, I have to say I don't love cable knitting, texture knitting when you can't read your knitting. And for me, it's much more difficult for me to read my knitting when it's like backwards. So I really, on the front side, because now it's being knit flat, on the front side I knit it like really fast. I get like each one done. It's like very easy. And on the back side I like really have to read the chart and make sure that I know what I'm doing, because it's just really easy for me to get like thrown off and then have to go back and redo it. And so that is just taking me a little bit of time. My next work in progress that I put some work on the last couple of weeks is my Molly Weasley scrap blanket. This is the now very well-known northeasterly pattern by Melissa Alexander Loomis, or Skinanigans. And I started this a long time ago. It's something that I've just been sort of working on as I come across different leftover yarns and things like that. But you can see, so from here all the way to here, I knitted this week, which was crazy. So what ended up happening is I went to one of my favorite local yarn stores called Colorful Yarns, and all I wanted to do was get the pom-pom that I put on the top of my Madame Maxime and Hagrid hat, so I just wanted to get this. And then I saw that they were having a sale on their minis, and so I was like, oh, I'll go over, I'll like take a look, see what they've got. And then they had these knitted wit gumballs, so they were just I think 10 gram minis. 10 gram minis, knitted wit gumballs. And I was looking at them and I was like, oh, like these are kind of cool. Like I like these colors. They're really awesome. And then I started reading the name of the colors and I like lost my shit. I was like that freak who is like sitting on the ground of the yarn store with like 50 minis around me, trying to decide which ones I should get. I was like sort of panicking because I wanted all of them, but I couldn't like come home with that. Like that would just be a little bit absurd. Now I'm regretting it a little bit because I just really have loved knitting with them. But as you can imagine, they were all Harry Potter themed, like all of them. And honestly, I want to go back because there were even some like really subtle colorways that I'm like, why didn't I get that? That was awesome. Like for instance, Merope's locket. I mean, come on. Or like Hepzibah's heirloom. Like, I feel like those are things where you're like, huh, like if you're not like true Harry Potter fan, you might know if people are say like Horcrux or something like that, but you're not going to know that in depth. And so, oh my God, I was just like, they're incredible. But anyway, so I bought several of them and I'll go over them now because they're so awesome. Okay, so this one, I'll show you the front of it. This one is Taking Umbrage. This one is Spectre Specs. This is not one of them. This is just leftover yarn from my socks. This one is Saint Mungo's, Night Moves, and Runiel Waslid. So, taking umbrage. This is from the 5th book of Harry Potter. This is when, I think this is in reference to when Hermione sort of tricks Umbridge to coming to the Forbidden Forest with them. And then they make a lot of noise so that the centaurs come, and the centaurs end up taking Umbridge away after she calls them half-breeds, and after she says that they have like less than, or like almost human intelligence or something like that. And I just think it's great because it has the pink for Umbridge, but then also just like the dirty greens and things like that, which I think just like perfectly symbolize the Forbidden Forest. So I thought that was super fun, and just like taking Umbridge, what? Spectre Specs, this is obviously just some sort of iconic glasses that Luna Lovegood is wearing when they first meet her because she's reading the Quibbler. This one is St. Mungo's, which is, the long name for it is St. Mungo's, I think it's St. Mungo's Hospital for, like, Magical Maladies or something like that. I think it's something slightly different than that, but this is St. Mungo's, so this is the wizard hospital where both wizards and muggles who have had magical injuries go to. I think it might be, like, Hospital for Magical Injuries and Maladies. I think that's it. St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Injuries and Maladies, which I love it. And I'll talk about St. Mungo's a little bit. That's going to go a little bit more into my Harry Potter talk. But I thought this was beautiful. I think we don't really get a great description of what the inside of St. Mungo's looks like, but I just thought this color was beautiful. This one is called Night Moves, night like a knight in shining armor, and that is in reference to the Night Bus, which I just think was, this is the perfect colorway for the Night Bus. And then Runiel Waslib is a reference to the 6th book, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Ron buys a self-correcting quill that works for a little while and then just starts writing like random stuff. And when Snape realizes that Harry has probably his own textbook because of the spells that he's using, Harry switches it out for Ron's. And in Ron's, the name that is written there is Runiel Waslib. And it's pretty funny because Snape is like, what the fuck is this? But I loved those. I think that this is a great pattern. I mean, everybody and their mom and their aunt and their brother and their cousin, whatever, everybody has been knitting this because it's so fun, and all of the ends are already weaved in for you. It's already sewn together. It's just like a really, really fun knit. Most of these are yarns that I've just used in other projects or minis that I've gotten while I was traveling. The only one of the gumballs that I have not knit into it yet is Bird Nerd, which I love because obviously I'm a Ravenclaw, which is obviously the best house. I mean, come on. But I'm a Ravenclaw. The thing that I really, really appreciated about this is that you know that she is a true, actually she or he, I don't actually know who this dyer is, but you know that they are true Harry Potter fans of the books because this is bronze and blue, rather than the sort of silver and blue that they use in the movies. I have one comment to say about the houses. So I have always identified with Ravenclaw. I was Ravenclaw when I took the Pottermore quiz. But I think my second house, I think the house that I would be like, ooh, maybe I should have, had those, maybe when I was having... if I was at Hogwarts and I was having sort of a contemplation about if I was in the right house, which as we know is a very common thing that people think about, my house that I might be in is Slytherin. And I've always been a little bit hesitant to talk about that because I think Slytherin is always seen as this terrible house, but there's so many good qualities to it. And I was actually watching an interview with Lin-Manuel Miranda, who... as the whole world knows, and if you don't know, then you should go see it immediately or at least listen to the soundtrack because it's amazing. But he wrote Hamilton, and someone asked him what his Hogwarts house was, and he said Slytherin. So I was like, if Lin-Manuel Miranda is a Slytherin, then I'm not a Slytherin, but I can support the fact that I'm sort of a combination between Ravenclaw and Slytherin. All right. My last work in project My last work in progress is my Mimbulus Mimbletonia socks. So this is, and on here you can just see a little progress keeper, which is a letter, and that is a simply serving progress keeper. So this is Hue Loco Phyllis sock yarn on the moss colorway, and it's this really beautiful mossy green that has sort of a white color with some like really dark teal specks in there as well. And Hue Loco is a local dyer to me. I think she dyes out of Boulder, Colorado. And then this pattern is actually a free pattern on Fancy Tiger Crafts website. It is the Thunder and Lightning Socks by Dawn Henderson. So you can go onto the Fancy Tiger Crafts site and actually download this for free right away. I did change it quite a bit because the sock itself actually goes into the heel flap and gusset right here, and then this sort of textured rib is on just the front of the sock, and I decided I prefer to have my socks a little bit longer than that just because I often am wearing boots and things like that in the wintertime. So what I did is I cast on, it's this really cute pattern. I feel like it's hard for you to see, but it has this 1x1 twisted rib, then a garter rib, and then it has this really fun stitch pattern in the middle that also has some bobbles on it, which is just such a fun little texture, and then it has this textured rib. So I did this, and then I just added a couple of inches of plain stockinette, and then I just sort of turned it into a vanilla sock. I'm also doing a Fish Lips Kiss heel, because I have it memorized and it's very easy. So the thing that I love about this was sort of like a magical thing because it's self-striping. I mean, it's not meant to. I think that's just the way that it pulls. Like, it's not advertised as a self-striping sock, but I think it looks so awesome. I really love it. And what's fun is Sean, my husband, and I went to go see It Too, which I love horror movies. I love them. I think it's really fun to be scared in a really safe environment. So we went and saw that. I will say I didn't like it nearly as much as the first one, but I still thought it was amazing. And Bill Hader is like a dream. Him and Finn Wolfhard are what makes those movies so great, I swear. Anyway, so it's a very long movie. It's 3 hours, and I put this in just to be like, I wonder how long I'll knit, and I knit like almost the entire foot, which is awesome. Because you walk out and you're like, oh, like how fun is that? I knit so much more than I've ever knit before, and it's fun too because it's the first time that I've ever done cinnamon knitting, which I feel like is something that Amy Florence always talks about on her Stranded podcast, is her cinnamon knitting. So I feel very fancy when I say the word cinema. But yeah, I'm really, really loving this. I decided to name it Mimbulus Mimbletonia because this week in my sort of Harry Potter talk, I'm going to be talking a lot about Neville Longbottom, which is why I said that I would be coming back to St. Mungo's. And the Mimbulus Mimbletonia is a very rare plant that is notable. It sort of looks like a cactus that's kind of gray, and it's covered in these boils. It's sort of pulsating and squirming in nature, and it has a very unique defense mechanism in which when it's prodded, stink sap, which is a green, dark green, really smelly sap, will come out of the boils. And it's described as smelling like rancid manure, which might be the worst thing. Yeah, I just never want to smell that. Anyway, it's a very rare plant, but our boy Neville is a master at herbology, and he is gifted a Mimbulus Mimbletonia from his great uncle for his 15th birthday. And it's also used as a password to the Gryffindor Common Room in the beginning of the 1995 to 1996 school year, which I just think is awesome. So yeah, this is sort of inspired by one of Neville's plants, the Mimbulus Mimbletonia, and also by Neville Longbottom himself. All right, so the only other thing that I have to talk about in terms of whips is that now that I have cast off my Askews shawl, I don't like to have too many like big projects on the needles, but now that I have cast that off, I am definitely going to cast on, probably later today because I don't think I'll be able to stop myself, my Soldotna crop, which I'm naming Bards of Azkaban Fortress. And this is the Voolenvine yarns. This is her Soldotna crop colors. I'm going to change it a little bit from the color choices that she used, but it will honestly look very similar to hers. I'm just bringing the the pink in a little bit more. But I am really, really excited to start that. I really want it ready so that I can actually wear it in the fall because it's just going to be incredible. All right, so just a little bit of acquisition. So the only couple things that I have bought this week are the, or last week I guess, was the Knitwit gumballs, and then I also went to Fancy Tiger Crafts and got just some fabric so that I could make one more project bag and then also get started on a quilt for someone that I really love who is having a baby, which is really exciting. So I got this awesome, it's just a half yard of this really awesome mushroom fabric, and I'm going to use it as a lining because I still have quite a bit of this waxed canvas yet, so it's going to be these two together, which I think is going to be awesome. And I'm definitely going to interface it this time because the last one I didn't interface and it's just a little bit flimsy, and I really want to make sure that it like fits, like that it works perfectly. So that is one thing. And then I am making this amazing quilt that I found online. So essentially what it is it looks like a bunch of socks, and they're like, it's a paper piece pattern, which I have never done before, but you know, gotta get out of your comfort zone, you know? I mean, it might end up terrible, but that's what I'm gonna do anyway. So it looks like a bunch of socks, and what I'm gonna do is the socks are longer than they are wide. So I think I'm gonna do like 4 across, 5 down, and then one of them I'm actually gonna do a little embroidery on that one that is like a little embroidery of Dobby, and then it will say free the house elves. So I'm just gonna have a bunch of socks in a bunch of different colors, and so I got some fat quarters to make those socks. So let's go through these really fast. These were only like $3 at Fancy Tiger Crafts, and so it was like a pretty inexpensive way. And then the rest of the stuff I'm gonna go get at Joann's Fabrics because it's like needs a little bit bigger, and I think I can get it for super cheap there. But I wanted the socks themselves to be kind of like funky and cool. It's like something that like is your baby blanket, but then when you're like older, you're like, this is actually pretty dope, you know? So this cat fabric I think is hilarious. This is just like a really beautiful motif with birds and flowers. This one is really fun. It's got like all of these drawn characters, which I think are from A Little Prince, but I have to look at that. This is some more like birds. More birds. We don't know the sex right now, and so I'm trying to make it unisex, but also I think everything should be unisex because, you know, the thing is that a kid might be born and they might have some genitalia, but that's not necessarily what their gender actually is. So I'm trying to make it so that, you know, when they're teenagers or younger than that and they're like, I don't know what's going on, then they'll love it anyway because it won't be all blue or all pink. It'll be a little bit of both. Anyway, that's my rant for the day. All right, this one I really like because it has all of these little foxes that are like taking care of baby foxes, which I just think is so cute. So anyway, I might have to get more of the fat quarters because I want the main part of each sock to be a different fat quarter. So I'll definitely have to get more. But I just wanted to like start with these and start making them and then see how it goes. Also because sometimes with quilting I like bite off more than I can chew, and then suddenly I'm like, and then the only other acquisitions I have are actually this really amazing gift that my mom got me. And I don't, I think like the gift was really just that she was really proud of me. I've had like a really rough past few months. As I've already said, I was in the hospital, but then I also had a board exam. I had to apply to residency, which I just finished on Friday, and now I have another board exam that I have on Wednesday. So like 2 days from now, 3 days from now. God. And so my mom just wanted me to give me a gift to kind of get me through that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast on the shift, not cowl, but the shift shawl by Andrea Mowry. And I actually got the Goosey Fiber, the Goosey Fiber yarn that she is making hers out of. And they are all colorways that are inspired by, not Harry Potter. I mean, they do have some Harry Potter ones, which are really awesome, but these are all inspired by Winnie the Pooh, which was something that I loved even before I loved Harry Potter, because it was there before Harry Potter even existed. I always personally really loved Tigger, but I loved all of the characters, and Winnie the Pooh was probably my favorite like childhood book and TV show, and anything that was Winnie the Pooh. I just like loved everything about it. So this is Smackerel of Wonder, The Gloomy Place. I think this one is perfect for Eeyore. Like, what? And then the Chestnuts. And then it will go into Fierce Creatures, Silly Old Bear, and Where the Woozle Wasn't. So this is the order I'm thinking of. I might end up changing it, because who knows, but it's so awesome. I really love it. They're all really beautiful. They're all worsted weight. They are all 100% superwash merino, worsted weight, approximately 218 yards, 100 grams. They're so beautiful. I'm really excited. I think that I'm probably going to cast on my Soldotna crop, and then probably right after that I'll cast this on. I'm going to do some traveling though, and I don't think I want to bring all of these yarns, because it's just like a metric shit ton of yarn, and I don't know that I want to like schlep that all around. All right, so that is the last of the knitting content. I am now going to move on talking about Harry Potter and the Harry Potter series. So the first thing that I wanted to put on here and just like nail down is my favorite to least favorite Harry Potter books. I wanted to do this because I think it's something that I'll look back on in like 5 years and be like, whoa, that's so funny that that's what I thought. I completely disagree now, and now this is what my order is. Because that has happened several times to me. So I think this is more of just like a timestamp of like, in this moment, these are my favorites and these are my least favorites of the Harry Potter series. And I'll go into a little bit of detail why. And I know it will be controversial because I've heard a lot of these and I like disagree with all of them because I know what is right. Now, obviously this is all opinion. And I think the other obvious thing that I should point out is that Harry Potter is my favorite thing in the entire world. So while I am ordering them, I think that I must say that even my least favorite on this is still one of my favorite books and still better than like almost any other book that I've ever read. So I just want to preface that and just know that even though I say all of these things, I still love it so much. It's amazing. Okay. I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of like hate messages from my mom about this because I bet she disagrees, but okay. My least favorite is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. So I think that this is an incredible story. This is also a great book because it's where the story really turns, I think, from being a more of a children's book to more of an adult book, mainly because a child dies at the end, which is a pretty intense and crazy thing to have happen. I also really like that it introduces you to different worlds, different magical schools, different ways of teaching magic to students. But that being said, I felt like it was very rushed. I think that with all of the tasks, it's like a lot of time goes by, and then all of a sudden it's like boom, 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 tasks. And I just think that there could have been a lot more nuance with this. I think that it just felt very rushed to me, and I didn't think that the writing and the storytelling was as good as the other books. I will say that I have read interviews of J.K. Rowling, and she also says that she feels like this is her worst book because she was very rushed when she had to write it. And I think that it is obvious. However, it is still one of the best books ever. And I also think that the twist at the end is like crazy. And you're like, what? You know, which she does with almost all of her books. There's a twist at the end. But my least favorite. After that is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I think that this book is incredible. I think... I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Binge Mode, and they have this whole like bit throughout the whole thing that is like my good friend Tom. I just think it's hilarious. But the thing that I really like about this book is the fact that they introduce the hatred and propaganda that you see within the wizarding world, and this is really the first time that you ever experience that kind of racism against half-bloods, mudbloods as they call them, which is, you know, I think that it's beautiful because it's something that we see all the time, everywhere, and, you know, I think that this makes it so that you can talk to kids about hate and racism and things that are still very pervasive in our culture that are really terrible. And I think this puts it into perspective that children can understand, or that young people can understand. I think that it's a very similar story to the first book. And I think she was still very much coming into her own when she was writing this. And so I don't think that it is the best, but I actually, like, I go back and forth. Like, sometimes I actually really love this book, but it's in number 6. It's in my, like, 6th worst one. After that, I've also gone back and forth with this, is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I think that this book bothers me because Harry Potter is just so goddamn angsty. Like, he is a teenager in the worst time that there is to be a teenager. He's just like such a little fuck. But I think that the thing that's important about this is Harry Potter learns a lot about himself, about the wizarding world, about the prophecy, and again, you lose a really amazing character in this book as well. I mean, most of the books, someone dies in the end. Well, yeah, I mean, even starting with the first book, I mean, technically it's just Quirrell, but still, he did. But again, I think that this book is incredible, but Harry is so angsty, and sometimes that annoys me. Now, this is when it starts to get really hard, because I love all of these books. The next one is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I think that this book is incredible, and I will always hold like a place for this in my heart because it was the first of the Harry Potter books. And so it is the book that introduced us to the world, introduced us to Harry Potter, and made us fall in love with reading. And so I will always love this book. I think that I put it lower on the list just because it is written more for children, because I think, you know, her J.K. Rowling really wrote for her audience and wrote for her audience to grow up with the books. And so this is just a little bit more rudimentary than the others. But the fact that you get introduced to the world, like, this book is the book that I go to read and listen to when I'm having a really hard time and I just need to be reintroduced to magic. The next one is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I think this one is so fun because There is a villain who doesn't end up actually being a villain, and I think the twist at the end is so incredible, and I love that Harry learns a lot more about his father, and I love that he is introduced to some of his father's friends. I think Remus Lupin is an incredible Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, and a really complex and interesting character. I love that they introduce bigotry again. I mean, they've introduced it in the second book, but they introduce it again. They like continue to expand bigotry in this book, and it's great. I also just like, there's something about the fact that like Voldemort isn't actually trying to get Harry in this book that I just think is interesting. The next is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. This book is incredible because it is the climax. It's the end. It has some amazing action, really complex, interesting characters. You learn more about all of the characters. You learn more about the background of people like Albus Dumbledore and Severus Snape, and a lot of things are wrapped up. And it's just a really wonderful ending. There's like so much to be said about the end of this book, and I think that I'll probably do several podcasts where I talk about Harry's sacrifice and the end and what comes after that. But this is just so beautiful. I literally remember when I went and got it, I was like, it was like the summer before my senior year of high school. I just read it and read it and read it until I was done. I think I like didn't sleep. I just stayed up until I like could not keep my eyes open, passed out, woke up again, and kept reading. Like, you know, I also think this book makes me so sad because it's the last one. There's so many feelings in this book. I think the reason why it's not my favorite is because I do think the extended camping trip that they have, she writes it so perfectly because the characters themselves are pissed off and annoyed. But then I also am like, this is going on forever. So that's why it's not my favorite. Which leads, I think that is so controversial, but my favorite is Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. God, I love this book. I think this is the most beautiful of the books. I think it is the most well thought through of the books. I love that you really learn about Voldemort in this book. I love that you go into his past. You find out who he was, how he became what he was today. And I love the interactions between Dumbledore and Harry. I think it's such a beautiful way that Dumbledore saves Harry in the end. And this might be the worst of the movies, but it is the best book. And it's the worst of the movies because they change so much stupid shit for no reason. Anyway, that's for another time. But this book is just beautiful. I really love that they take the time to have you know the characters, and even the characters that are bad. I think that's like a really beautiful thing about this book. It also is the book when Harry realizes, you know, what he needs to do and how he's going to do that. And I also think, you know, you learning more about Snape in this book is also really interesting. And the twist at the end, and the fact that Snape kills Dumbledore at the end, it makes it so that you go into the last book being like, I don't know what to believe. Like, I thought Snape was a good guy, and now I have no idea because he just fucking killed Dumbledore. Like, what? Anyway, so good. But, as I've said, I am going to be talking about Neville Longbottom today. And I am going to be reading a couple excerpts from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I'm going to be reading a little bit from chapter 23, Christmas on the Closed Ward, and chapter 37, The Lost Prophecy. And then we'll just sort of go in later and talk about Neville. Okay. Christmas on the Closed Ward. Harry's head spun round. The curtains had been drawn back from the two beds at the end of the ward, and two visitors were walking back down the aisle between the beds. A formidable-looking old witch wearing a long green dress, a moth-eaten fox fur, and a pointed hat decorated with what was unmistakably a stuffed vulture. And, trailing behind her looking thoroughly depressed, Neville. With a sudden rush of understanding, Harry realized who the people in the end beds must be. He cast around wildly for some means of distracting the others so that Neville could leave the ward unnoticed and unquestioned. But Ron had looked up at the sound of the name Longbottom, too, and before Harry could stop him, had called, "Neville!" Neville jumped and cowered as though a bullet had narrowly missed him. "It's us, Neville," said Ron brightly, getting to his feet. "Have you seen? Lockhart's here. Who have you been visiting?" "Friends of yours, Neville dear?" said Neville's grandmother, graciously bearing down upon them all. Neville looked as though he would rather be anywhere in the world but here. A dull purple flush was creeping up his plump face, and he was not making eye contact with any of them. "Ah, yes," said his grandmother, peering at Harry and sticking out a shriveled claw-like hand for him to shake. "Yes, yes, I know who you are, of course. Neville speaks most highly of you." Thanks," said Harry, shaking hands. Neville did not look at him, but stared at his own feet, the color deepening in his face all the while. "And you two are clearly Weasleys," Mrs. Longbottom continued, proffering her hand regally to Ron and Ginny in turn. "Yes, I know your parents. Not well, of course, but fine people, fine people. And you must be Hermione Granger." Hermione looked rather startled that Mrs. Longbottom knew her name, but shook hands all the same. "Yes, Neville told me all about you. Helped him out of a few sticky spots, haven't you? He's a good boy," she said, casting sternly appraising look down her rather bony nose at Neville. "But he hasn't got his father's talent, I'm afraid to say." And she jerked her head in the direction of the two beds at the end of the ward, so that the stuffed vulture on her hat trembled alarmingly. "What?" said Ron, looking amazed. Harry wanted to stamp on Ron's foot, but that sort of thing was much harder to bring off unnoticed when you were wearing jeans rather than robes. "Is that your dad down there, Neville?" "What's this?" said Mrs. Longbottom sharply. "Haven't you told your friends about your parents, Neville?" Neville took a deep breath, looked up at the ceiling, and shook his head. Harry could not remember ever feeling sorrier for anyone, but he could not think of any way of helping Neville out of the situation. "Well, it's nothing to be ashamed of," said Mrs. Longbottom angrily. "You should be proud, Neville, proud. They didn't give their health and their sanity, so their only son would be ashamed of them, you know." "I'm not ashamed," said Neville very faintly, still looking anywhere but at Harry and the others. Ron was now standing on tiptoe to look over at the inhabitants of the two beds. "Well, you've got a funny way of showing it," said Mrs. Longbottom. "My son and his wife," she said, turning haughtily to Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Ginny, "were tortured into insanity by you-know-who's followers." Hermione and Ginny both clapped their hands over their mouths. Ron stopped craning his neck to catch a glimpse of Neville's parents and looked mortified. "They were Aurors, you know, and very well respected within the wizarding community," Mrs. Longbottom went on. "Highly gifted, the pair of them." "Yes, Alice, dear, what is it?" Neville's mother had come edging down the ward in her nightdress. She no longer had the plump, happy-looking face Harry saw in Moody's old photograph of the original Order of the Phoenix. Her face was thin and worn now. Her eyes seemed over-large, and her hair, which had turned white, was wispy and dead-looking. She did not seem to want to speak, or perhaps she was not able to, but she made timid motions towards Neville, holding something in her outstretched hand. "Again?" said Mrs. Longbottom, sounding slightly weary. "Very well, Alice dear, very well. Neville, take it, whatever it is." But Neville had already stretched out his hand, into which his mother dropped an empty Drubel's blowing gum wrapper. "Very nice, dear," said Neville's grandmother in a falsely cheery voice, patting his mother on the shoulder. But Neville said quietly, "Thanks, Mum." His mother tottered away back up the ward, humming to herself. Neville looked around at the others, his expression defiant, as though daring them to laugh. But Harry did not think he'd ever found anything less funny in his life. "Well, we'd better get back," said Mrs. Longbottom, drawing on long green gloves. "Very nice to have met you all. Neville, put the wrapper in the bin. She must have given you enough of them to paper your bedroom by now." But as they left, Harry was sure he saw Neville slip the wrapper into his pocket. The door closed behind them. "I never knew," said Hermione, who looked tearful. "Nor did I," said Ron rather hoarsely. "Nor me," whispered Ginny. They all looked at Harry. "I did," he said glumly. Dumbledore told me, but I promised I wouldn't mention it. That's what Bellatrix Lestrange got sent to Azkaban for, using the Cruciatus curse on Neville's parents until they lost their minds. Bellatrix Lestrange did that? Whispered Hermione, horrified. The woman creatures got a photo of in his den. So the next is from much later in the book, one of the last chapters, The Lost Prophecy. The prophecy smashed, Harry said blankly. I was pulling Neville up those benches in the room where the archway was, and I ripped his robes, and it fell. The thing that smashed was merely the record of the prophecy kept by the Department of Mysteries, but the prophecy was made to somebody, and that person has the means of recalling it perfectly. Who heard it? Asked Harry, though he thought he knew the answer already. I did, said Dumbledore. On a cold, wet night 16 years ago, in a room above the bar of the Hogshead Inn, I had gone there to see an applicant for the post of divination teacher, though it was against my inclination to allow the subject of divination to continue at all. The applicant, however, was the great-great-granddaughter of a very famous, very gifted seer, and I thought it common politeness to meet her. I was disappointed. It seemed to me that she had not a trace of the gift herself. I told her courteously, I hope, that I did not think she would be suitable for the post. I turned to leave. Dumbledore got to his feet and walked past Harry to the blank cabinet that stood beside Fawkes's perch. He bent down, slid back a catch, and took from inside it the shallow stone basin carved with runes around the edges, in which Harry had seen his father tormenting Snape. Dumbledore walked back to his desk, paced the pensive upon it, and raised his wand to his own temple. From it, he withdrew silvery, gossamer-fine strands of thought clinging to the wand and deposited them in the basin. He sat back down behind his desk and watched his thoughts swirl and drift inside the pensive for a moment. Then, with a sigh, he raised his wand and prodded the silvery substance with its tip. A figure rose out of it, draped in shawls, her eyes magnified to enormous size behind her glasses, and she revolved slowly, her feet in the basin. But when Sybil Trelawney spoke, it was not in her usual ethereal, mystic voice, but in the harsh, hoarse tones Harry had heard her use once before. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. And the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the 7th month dies. The slowly revolving Professor Trelawney sank back into the silver mass below and vanished. The silence within the office was absolute. Neither Dumbledore nor Harry nor any of the portraits made a sound. Even Fawkes had fallen silent. Professor Dumbledore, Harry said very quietly, for Dumbledore, still staring at the pensive, seemed completely lost in thought. What did that mean? It meant, said Dumbledore, that the person who has the only chance of conquering Lord Voldemort, for good, was born at the end of July, nearly 16 years ago. This boy would be born to parents who have already defied Voldemort 3 times. Harry felt as though something was closing in upon him. His breathing seemed difficult again. It means me? Dumbledore took a deep breath. The odd thing is, Harry, he said softly, that it may not have been you at all. Sybil's prophecy could have applied to 2 wizard boys, both born at the end of July that year, both of whom had parents in the Order of the Phoenix, both sets of parents having narrowly escaped Voldemort 3 times. One, of course, was you. The other was Neville Longbottom. But then, why was it my name on the prophecy and not Neville's? The official record was relabeled after Voldemort's attack on you as a child, said Dumbledore. It seemed plain to the Keeper of the Hall of Prophecy that Voldemort could only have tried to kill you because he knew you to be the one to whom Sybil was referring. Then it might not be me, said Harry. I'm afraid, said Dumbledore slowly, looking as though every word cost him great effort, that there is no doubt that it is you. But you said Neville was born at the end of July too, and his mom and dad. You are forgetting the next part of the prophecy, the final identifying feature of the boy who could vanquish Voldemort. Voldemort himself must mark him as his equal. And so he did, Harry. He chose you, not Neville. He gave you the scar that has proved both blessing and curse. But he might have chosen wrong, said Harry. He might have marked the wrong person. He chose the boy he thought most likely to be a danger to him, said Dumbledore. And notice this, Harry. He chose not the purebred, which according to his creed is the only kind of wizard worth being or knowing, but the half-blood, like himself. He saw himself in you before he had ever seen you, and in marking you with that scar, he did not kill you, as he intended, but gave you powers and a future, which have fitted you to escape him not once, but 4 times so far. Something that neither your parents nor Neville's parents ever achieved. Why did he do it then? Said Harry, who felt numb and cold. Why did he try to kill me as a baby? He should have waited to see whether Neville or I looked more dangerous when we were older and tried to kill whoever it was then. That might indeed have been the more practical course, said Dumbledore, except that Voldemort's information about the prophecy was incomplete. The Hogshead Inn, which Sybil chose for its cheapness, has long attracted, shall we say, more interesting clientele than the 3 broomsticks. As you and your friends found out to your cost, and I to mine that night. It is a place where it is never safe to assume you are not being overheard. Of course, I had not dreamed when I set out to meet Sybil Trelawney that I would hear anything worth overhearing. Our one stroke of good fortune was that the eavesdropper was detected only a short way into the prophecy and thrown from the building. So he heard only the first part, the part foretelling the birth of a boy in July to parents who had thrice defied Voldemort. Consequently, he could not warn his master that to attack you would be to risk transferring power to you, again, marking you as his equal. So Voldemort never knew that there might be danger in attacking you, that it might be wise to wait to learn more. He did not know that you would have power the Dark Lord knows not. So, Neville Longbottom. I think that Neville is one of the most amazing and least respected and most tragic characters in all of the Harry Potter films and books. At first, in the beginning of the series, Neville has housed this tragedy and pain and hidden it from everybody. And at first, he's just comic relief. Like, he's just there to, like, get into mishaps and, like, get something wrong and do something that he's not supposed to do or forget something. And then, as it moves on, you realize how tragic his character is and how his life is probably even more tragic than Harry's. So, for instance, in the books, Harry barely remembers his parents. He gets little glimpses of them, and in fact, in the 3rd book, he finds it hard to fight Dementors because even though he's reliving his parents' death, he still gets to see them, which is something that he doesn't really get to do and he doesn't really remember. The sad thing about Neville is that it's not that Neville barely remembers his parents, it's that his parents barely remember him. So in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, there's a section that says, as Harry took off his glasses and climbed into his 4-poster, he imagined how it must feel to have parents still living, but unable to recognize you. He often got sympathy from strangers for being an orphan, but as he listened to Neville's snores, he thought that Neville deserved it more than he did. Because Neville is an orphan too, but he still sees the shells of his parents, the shells of what they could be, and they still, when they see him, they still recognize somewhere deep inside that he is important to them, and thus give him little presents like those gumball wrappers. But they can't talk with him, and they don't know him, they don't remember him. And that is so sad. I also think that Neville is just sort of an unsung hero. He stands up for what is right, even when it's difficult, even at the very beginning, when he's still shy and timid. So in the first book, he tries to stop them from leaving, and that's what ultimately wins Gryffindor the House Cup. But in the 7th book, he's tortured for not performing the Cruciatus curse on people who've had detention. So you can see that he is such a strong character, and he knows what's right and wrong. There are also just so many interesting similarities between Harry and Neville. I mean, not just that, everything that the prophecy is said everything that Dumbledore outlined, with the fact that they were both born at the end of July. They both had parents in the Order of the Phoenix. Both of their parents were sort of permanently incapacitated either through death or insanity. But also, there are smaller things, like Snape treats both of them terribly. And with Harry, you can I think Snape is a very complex and pretty terrible he's a complex character, but a terrible teacher. Like, he clearly does not give a shit about if his students actually learn anything. He's really bad at his job. But you kind of understand, in a way, why he treats Harry that way. I cannot put a finger on why he is so awful to Neville. Someone who's weak in the beginning. I mean, he's not weak, but again, J.K. Rowling is just so complex that in some ways he is weak. They also both felt like they didn't belong in Gryffindor. So Harry feels like he maybe should have been in Slytherin, especially during the 2nd book when he can speak Parseltongue and everybody thinks that he's the heir of Slytherin. And for Neville, it doesn't really explain which one he thought that he maybe should be in, but he always said, that he didn't feel brave enough to be in Gryffindor, which is crazy, because clearly he is. And then again, with the bravery, I also think it's important to think about them both as very, very brave. Not only for what I've already talked about with Neville. I mean, I'm not going to go into why Harry Potter's brave, because I think that is very obvious, and I'm sort of talking about Neville, but Neville's bravery is so strong. I mean, you see that growing and growing throughout the entire books, but it just comes to a full culmination in The Deathly Hallows, the last book. In the chapter The Flaw in the Plan, Voldemort says, "You show spirit and bravery, and you come of noble stock. You will make a very valuable Death Eater. We need your kind, Neville Longbottom." And Neville Longbottom, to the Dark Lord, to Voldemort, to Tom Riddle, our good friend Tom, says, "I'll join you when hell freezes over Dumbledore's army." He also, shortly after, cuts the snake's head off, killing the last Horcrux. I mean, come on. Fucking Neville. He's such a badass. So it says, "With a single stroke, Neville sliced off the great snake's head, which spun high into the air, gleaming in the light flooding from the entrance hall, and Voldemort's mouth was open in a scream of fury that nobody could hear." Oh my god. The other thing that connects Harry and Harry and Neville, which I've already talked about, is their loss. But I do think it is important that there's a part where Moody is showing Harry the photograph of the original Order of the Phoenix. And about Neville's parents, he says, "Poor devils," growled Moody. "Better dead than what happened to them." Which is, I think, why I feel like while they both have difficult lives, both Harry and Neville is really the unsung hero. He's the one who experienced this tragedy, but he doesn't have the fame. He doesn't have the support. He doesn't have the relationships, and he's treated pretty poorly by a lot of the people in his lives. But what's amazing is that throughout the series, Neville really comes into his own. And by the end, he's a professor at Hogwarts teaching his favorite subject, herbology, married to Hannah Abbott, living above, I think it's the 3 broomsticks, and generally just like killing it at life. So Neville Longbottom, a very complex, beautiful character that I really, really enjoyed learning more about as I've been knitting the St. Mungos and knitting my socks. So that's the end. Another long one. I think that I'll probably be on in a couple of weeks. Hopefully be able to show you a little bit of my bars of Azkaban Fortress Soldotna. So if anybody is out there watching, thanks for tuning in. I hope that everybody is really enjoying fall, getting ready for the leaves to change and the crispness in the air. I think it's just such an incredible time of year. So happy knitting, happy sewing, and I'll see you soon. Bye.